Kia ora, welcome to Under the Checkered Flag, MotoGP edition. I'm your host Kate, and we're just going to jump right in. Wow, what a weekend day. We were at Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya, and my goodness, I'm pleased to say that everyone has suffered no serious long-term life-threatening injuries, which does seem to be something I should start disclaiming at the start of these podcasts, because we had a very, very scary crash in MotoGP, which we'll discuss later on. But as I said, Pecco is remarkably okay considering what could have been an absolutely horrific accident. Enea Bastianini is also going to be okay in the long run. He does need a couple of surgeries, but I think today we can just count our lucky stars. So this is going to be a race review style pod. Going to start with Moto3, move on to MotoGP, via Moto2. So let's get into it. So Moto3 was an absolute banger of a race. As always, it was easily fighting for the best one of the weekend this weekend. We saw so many overtakes, so many bold moves, we should say, with the boldest move of all coming from Deniz Öncü. I think his penalty was harsh. So what happened was that David Munoz, who is notoriously rough-handed himself, he ran wide, and so he decided to come back into the racing line. Deniz Öncü kept riding as though Munoz was not going to come back into that racing line. Munoz and Deniz come together, and Munoz crashes out, effectively ruining his race. Now, personally, I do think the penalty Öncü got was harsh. He got a double long lap penalty, and because he was unable to serve it in the race, that gave him a 6-second time penalty, which bumped him from 3rd position down to 12th position. Now, in terms of the championship, this is quite catastrophic for Öncü. It's a really critical time, and I just, again, don't think it's up to the consistency with the stewards. Admittedly, off the top of my head, I can't find a similar incident that Deniz has done. I know this isn't his first infraction of the year, so maybe that is why, and they're using that gradual sliding scale as to the punishments get more severe. But it did seem like a very harsh penalty. I would have probably done a single long lap, but that's just me. I'm not the stewards, and he did ruin Munoz's race. We did see some shots afterwards of Öncü, which I always struggle with when riders are high on adrenaline, so to speak. I think that the cameras probably should be kept away from them a bit, because these guys have just been travelling at 300 or so kilometres per hour, and their adrenaline's going to be pumping like those of us who are sitting on the sidelines can't really imagine. People who have never thrown their leg over a bike definitely can't imagine what it feels like. And so, yeah, I think we should show them a little bit more respect and maybe get out of their faces so much, because, you know, the emotions are running high. We saw what happened with Dixon in England, and the comments that he made, which he's dialed back, create a new word, Kate, dialed back and apologised, but it just shows the heightened emotions that they can have and how they speak without thinking. Like, all of us do this. The majority of us don't have a camera in our face at the time, and we can apologise directly to whoever we insult, and then life goes on. These guys are going to have to live with it being in the public domain, like, for ages. So that's my little tangent for Moto3 over. So on to the results. The good news is it gave Jose Rueda his first maiden Moto3 podium. So big props to him. It was still a very good day for KTM, and yeah, you gotta I don't think that Denise's penalty should take anything away from the absolute amazing performance of Aprilia. So, very well done. In P2 was Jamie Massier, so that's a very good championship points haul for him. And in P1 was David Alonso. We got to hear that Colombian national anthem again. Very, very wholesome indeed. Now, obviously there is a notable person missing from that podium, and that is Daniel Holgado, who crashed out all by himself. And now this championship, the Moto3 championship, has been blown wide open. And that's one of the fun things about Moto3, is that these things can happen and we don't know. And so I'm very excited to see what the next few weeks are going to bring. Hopefully it's more excellent racing. We've got less than a week until we're racing again. Where are we? San Marino. Wonderful. I love San Marino. But alas, that's Moto3. Let's move on to Moto2. My Aaron Canet fangirl heart is where it's so very used to being. Bless his soul. He was overriding that machine. You could see it. We saw him almost crash on the final lap, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just go straight into the results. It was an absolutely wild race that saw Arenas in P3, Canet in P2, and Dixon in P1. Tony Arbolino, let's talk about him. So he was down in P17, an absolute disaster of a race. And in fact, it was an absolute disaster of a weekend for the world champion hopeful. Very disappointed. I think maybe he's taken a bit of a confidence hit. I know he does sort of fade a bit more in the second half of the season, and so maybe that's part of what we're seeing here. But overall, he'll be very disappointed with this weekend. Hopefully he can turn it around next weekend, get back up there, get some gains on Acosta, and we can keep this championship battle alive. Because Pedro Acosta was in P6, I think he's going to be very happy with that, considering how far back Arbolino was. In fact, being P17, Arbolino didn't even score any points. So, while P6 obviously isn't the position that Pedro wanted to be in, I don't think he's going to be overly unhappy with those results either, because why would you be when your main rival didn't score any points? Any increase of your gap is a good one, and it's also going to be quite confidence boosting for Pedro to be like, okay, yeah, I can secure some solid points because Tony's getting nothing and anything is increasing the lead. So as long as he's got a good head on his shoulders and he does seem to have a good team around him, he'll be able to look at that and go, look, points need to be my main goal to make sure I secure this championship, because he wants to go up to GP as champion. Who wouldn't want that? So he's just going to have to keep doing what he's doing. Tony will need to push and turn things around, and yeah, overall a good weekend for Acosta and not for Arbolino. The person who had the best weekend of all, though, Jake Dixon. Well, I can understand his cheeky side. Okay, I know there's been so much backlash already online because he comes across as really, really cocky. I genuinely don't believe he is. So I think that Dixon has sort of like a Crutchlow-esque attempt at cheekiness that just comes out all wrong. Basically, I just think the guy needs some PR training, because, yeah, his comments come across as so cocky and arrogant and blunt. In fact, maybe he just is cocky, arrogant and blunt. I just like to think the best in people. I've really got to stop doing that, apparently, because, yeah, everyone tells me, Kate, no, they're just a dick. You just don't realise they're a dick because I'm not capable of being a dick. So it's like something I can't quite comprehend. So maybe he is just a cocky, arrogant arsehole. Don't quote me on that though, because I just genuinely don't know. I still think he's just trying to be funny. But you know, maybe he's not. Either way, that's Moto2. Let's go on to MotoGP. And while we're here, I am going to apologise for my voice. It seems like since I started this podcast, I've just had cold after cold after flu after cold. Been really unlucky, I feel. So, sorry, I am a little bit gravelly, is that what we call it? I don't quite know the term for it. I'm a bit gravelly, and my voice is a little bit still croaky. Apologise if you can hear my dog in the background. He's having a little bit of a tantrum because his daycare is closed, so he's not happy about having to be in the house with me today. I've taken him for a walk, but he'd still rather be at daycare. I can't tell him it's not open today. He doesn't understand English because he's a dog. So I apologise for that as well. Bear with me. It's been a long Monday. Starting with the MotoGP sprint. Now, we had a wonderful sprint race. It was nice, it was clean, it was quite anticlimactical when you compare it to the racing that occurred on Sunday in all three classes. So, we did finish with Maverick Vinales in P3, Pecco Bagnaia in P2, and Alicia Spargaro in P1. It was wholesome seeing Alix and Maverick on the podium. It was really, really good to see just those vibes from Alicia after last year. So for anyone who's new to MotoGP, last year at this track, Alicia Spargaro celebrated his finishing a lap early and then ended up finishing in P5. So it was a bit hard to watch because he was in the championship fight at that point, so all the points mattered, and to see such a simple and easy mistake to make because the tower counted the laps differently to every other circuit. It was a mistake that could have been made by anyone, and this year he ran a helmet, which is just so wholesome, and it just sums up why I like Alicia Spargaro so much. So his helmet had pictures of his family on it, and it also had a little sticker on it saying one more lap, just to remind him to make sure that the race was actually finished before he started celebrating. And he definitely did that. He pulled off a wheelie like no one else's business. The things these guys can do on bikes are absolutely incredible. So it was really wholesome. He took P1. It did feel as a bit of a redemption of some kind. What was even better though was his overtake for the win. It was so clean, it was so bold, and I suppose when it comes to Alicia, I don't expect that certain boldness in the overtakes. I don't expect the more aggressive manoeuvres that we all know that he's perfectly capable of doing. But you'd expect them from his teammate Maverick Vinales more. You'd expect them from Brad Binder, Marc Marquez, Jack Miller, the guys who are normally not afraid to get their elbows out in a race. You don't expect them so much from Alicia because he is that sort of father figure of the paddock. He's the one who, is the first one who's going to be complaining if there's safety concerns at the track. He's the one who you look to for advice in regards to, is this right? Are these penalties harsh? Are these penalties not harsh? The person I'd consider asking is Alicia, because he's just going to give it to you straight. He's not really afraid of, everyone calls him a whinger. I just call him passionate and absolutely not afraid to speak out about what he considers right and wrong, which is really, really good and really positive, in my opinion. Back to the results, we had the two championship fighters, Brad Binder in 4th and Jorge Martin in 5th. I think both of them are obviously going to be disappointed with this result because Pecco is in front of them, which means he claims more points from them in the championship fight. But overall, I think they're going to be both quite happy to be in that position. I know I'm not overly upset that Jorge Martin's in P5 because I've got him boosted in my fantasy this week, and obviously that's the most important thing, making sure I get my fantasy points, as many points as I can. Also in my team I've got Marco Bezzecchi, who unfortunately did not have a weekend worth remembering. he only got, I think, 2 points in the sprint, P8. I think that's 2 points anyway. And yeah, we'll move on to the Sunday now, because there's sort of a lot to talk about in the Sunday. So in Sunday we had another turn 1 incident. In this incident, it looks like, from watching some of the footage back now, like I said, that we know that all of the pilots are going to be okay. That's the only time I like to watch replays, once I know that everyone's going to be okay. And that's also definitely a bone I feel that we as fans really need to push with Dorna and whoever's in charge of that TV department, because we should not have been seeing the replays for both of these incidents constantly over and over again before we knew that Pecco was okay. So the first incident Pecco wasn't involved in, so this happened when it looked like Ineos had trouble braking. Personally, I think he got caught in Zarco's slipstream and wasn't going to be able to stop, so he then loses the front. It was a Ducati demolition, so he takes out both Gresini Ducatis, so he takes out Fabio Di Gianantonio, he takes out Alex Marquez, he also takes out Johann Zarco, and he also takes out Marco Bezzecchi. So he takes out 4 of the Ducatis, he's won himself, so he takes out 5 of the 8 Ducatis. It was not a fun watch in itself. Fortunately, all of the riders were pretty much straight up on their feet, and you're like, wow, that's intense. And then you go around the next corner and you see Pecco Bagnaia high side, and he high sides on his own. In a sense, it's probably quite fortunate that Enea Bastianini had taken out the other riders, because it meant that there were less riders to hit Pecco Bagnaia. And unfortunately, Brad Binder did hit Pecco Bagnaia. Fortunately, he hit him in the legs, and fortunately, Pecco's only suffered contusions, so he's only suffered some bruising to his legs. I will show some preliminary shots up on the screen for the video footage, but I'm not going to show any of the graphic images. It was just one of those holy heck moments. So there was just so much going on in these first couple of incidents that it was really hard to break down what was going on. And I think we're also going to see, moving forward, in a lot of social media, from people who clearly watch the race and then never watch back and never follow up on what actually happened in any incidents. What I think is that we're going to see these people blaming Enea for Pecco's crash, which is really, really going to irritate me. Because the fact remains that these were 2 totally separate incidents. Enea is at fault for that turn 1 incident, the one where he did take out the other 4 Ducatis. He has received a long lap penalty that will be served at the next race that he competes in. Whether or not that's fair, especially after that Denise Onchu penalty, that's up for lots of heavy debate. However, I don't think, he should be punished any more severely, especially because we now know that Enea has a broken foot and a broken hand that do both need surgery. So his absolute horror show of a season at Factory Ducati, it continues. It's rough. In some really twisted way, when I saw this, I'm like, oh God, please don't let one of these people be Miguel Oliveira. Fortunately, it wasn't. And I guess there were 2 reasons for that thought to cross my head. One of them is because, obviously, the only person having a season as horrific as Enea is Miguel Oliveira. That much I know for sure. And the second is, I was really keen for an Aprilia 1-2-3 podium. I may be a Honda fan. I may be a Marc Marquez fangirl. But there's something about Aprilia that's just so wholesome. And I think me, along with a lot of other people, wanted to see that 1-2-3, that podium lockout of Aprilia here. It would have been really good to see. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see it, but what we did get to see was 2 Aprilias on the podium along with a Ducati. Best of all, for my current Aprilia heart, that Ducati was in P3. Best of all, for my fantasy loving heart, that Ducati belonged to Jorge Martin. So Jorge, he managed to beat out Joan Zarco and Miguel Oliveira for that P3 spot. Miguel Oliveira ran an absolutely stunning race, considering he said on the Saturday that he struggled in the second half of the sprint, so we knew that during the second half of the race he was going to start to struggle, and he definitely did. There was a few glorious laps where we had Miguel in P3 behind Maverick Vinales and Alicia Spargaro, and it was quite a wholesome few moments. Unfortunately, it didn't last, and both Joan Zarco and Jorge Martin did overtake Miguel. Joan Zarco got P4 and Jorge Martin got that P3, which is absolutely wonderful for Jorge. It gives him some serious championship points because Pecco, having crashed out of the lead, which we will come back to, it means that he gained some serious points. He gained 25 points, clawed them back, I suppose, in terms of that championship fight. And now we know for a fact that Pecco's not going to be up to 100% because our next race is in a week, which just shows that the fact that we've got, I think it's 10 races in 13 weeks show that a single injury is going to blow this championship open. And that may just have happened because we don't know. There has been footage of Pecco walking. He's been on crutches, and you can see plasters and things on his legs. Again, fortunately, he's still got legs, basically, because he did have his legs run over. And this is a terrifying, terrifying sport sometimes. But yeah, fortunately, it could have been a lot worse. And especially, you know, if Binder had ran over a different part of his body, it could have been a lot worse. So again, we just have to count our lucky stars. In regards to that one, because yeah. But Jorge Martin's going to be very happy that he's clawed back 25 points. I'm very happy because, as I said, I've boosted him in fantasy. So, back to the results. I don't know how I tangented away there. Alas, it just keeps happening to me. My brain just does bouncing. In P2, we had Maverick Vinales. There was quite a long period of time where he was leading, and it was like, yes, go Mav. You've got this. Come on, be that first guy who wins with 3 different manufacturers. But alas, the tyres couldn't take it. So we did see a good chunk of footage, which I'll throw some photos up on the screen, of the fact that the Aprilia tyres were absolutely cooked. That sidewall was getting munched, so to speak. This track, Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya? I think that's what it's called. It's not Circuit of Catalunya de Barcelona. No, yeah, it's definitely Circuit of Barcelona de Catalunya. This track is notorious for munching up some tyres. You wouldn't really be going for the softs out of choice. But yeah, so I guess that sort of could be why, you know, in the closing laps of the race that we saw Maverick really start to fade. We saw Alicia do another really strong move on Maverick. We saw him take that lead. It was a clean but aggressive move. It probably would have irritated Maverick, but Maverick settled for P2, and we saw some very, very wholesome celebrations at the end. So they actually swapped bikes, which I think is just so sweet and comes back to that wholesome Aprilia family vibes, which I really enjoyed. So those are the top 5. We had Miguel Oliveira in P5, Joan Zarco P4, Jorge Martin in P3, Maverick Vinales in P2, and Alicia Spargaro in P1. So now that's the race. I do want to just quickly touch on Pecco Bagnaia's crash. I know I've ranted about the coverage of the crash, but I actually just want to touch on the fact that Pecco high-sided. So I don't think we've seen a high-side as high as that since Marc Marquez Repsol Honda high-side. I can't even remember what race it is, there's been so many with that Honda. But it's not something we see in a Ducati often, and it's a little bit worrying, and it will be really interesting. I don't know if we'll ever find out, but it will be really interesting to find out if it was an electronics failure or what caused that high side, because that crash really, based on what we see from the Ducatis, that crash shouldn't have been possible. We know Pecco's a champion of crashing when he's at the front, but they're always usually quite controlled low sides, and so seeing this high side was a bit more shocking. It was definitely shocking that, you know, one, it was a high side, and two, he then got struck by another pilot. But yeah, it'll be very interesting in the coming weeks, I suppose, to find out if it was just a one-off anomaly. That's a hard word to say. Anomaly. I can normally say it, maybe just not in a sentence. But yes, it'll be interesting to find out if this was an electronics failure, something that's just a one-off. Of course, hopefully it is, because high sides are always horrific to watch, and it was quite a thunk on the ground. But yeah, hopefully Pecco comes back strong. Hopefully we get some championship fighting again still. I don't think he's going to be 100% at this coming race, but yeah, only time's going to be able to tell that. Being a double header though, you know what that means. It's going to be on to Kate's insanely terrible predictions that are almost always wrong. So let's jump into that. So starting with my Moto3 predictions, I think in P1, no, let's start with P3. That seems like the right thing to do. I'm going to go a little bit spicy this week. I think we're going to see Adrian Fernandez in P3. I don't know why I'm getting this vibe. I just think it's going to happen. I hope it happens because it will be wholesome. And I love wholesome. So, Adrian Fernandez, P3. I think in P2, we're going to see Danny Holgado. I'm hoping that he performs strongly because it's always rough when people start to crack under pressure, because I guess I support an underdog a bit, so hopefully he doesn't crack so much under the pressure and performs strongly, basically. In P1, I think we're going to see Diogo Moreira. I think he's going to have a nice strong weekend. I know he performed quite strongly here last year from memory, but I'm quickly learning actually that I can't trust my memory very much. In fact, no one can, because last week I was like, oh yeah, Denise Onchu's won 3 races, and then someone promptly pointed out this is only his second win, and that third win is just a fragment of my imagination, so I don't know where I pulled that one from. Fortunately I didn't say it in the Discord server, otherwise Pozza would, you know, chew me out and spit me out because he's Onchu's biggest fan. But yeah, I don't know where I managed to pull that one from. That's quite unlike me, especially because I'm a relatively new Moto3 watcher. You'd think I would remember all the races I'd watched, but no, everything blurs together in my brain. But on to Moto2 predictions. So I think in P3 for Moto2, we're going to see Pedro Acosta. I think that's a more realistic position to be putting him in. I think he's going to want to bank some serious points again, like I mentioned earlier in the episode. I think that he's just going to be focusing on, you know, clinching that championship, securing it as early as possible so that he can then go on to push for some wins nearer the end of the season. I think in P2, we're going to see Ayagura. I think he was P6 here last year. Again, it's the memory thing. I'm not entirely sure I can trust my memory right now. But I think either way, he's going to perform strongly. In P1, I'm going to put Aaron Canet. Please, Aaron Canet. We want it so badly. I'm praying that the stars align for you. I'm not a praying person, but you know, it would be so wholesome to see him get his win, especially after the week that just was. Watching his interview afterwards was, it was quite hard. His voice and words were all like wholesome and like, yes, I'm very happy to have won, but his face just, it looked like he was a bit dead inside from another P2. I think he's had 13 P2s and 10 different riders finish in front of him, and it's just like, oh my god, the poor guy. Why has this happened? So yeah, I'm putting him in P1. I'm manifesting it, man. I would really love to see it happen. I think we all would. So I'm gonna just focus all my positive energy on an Aaron Canet win this weekend, and let's really hope it happens. So on to MotoGP. So it's looking like Enea Bastianini will be out of the race, so that's just one thing to note. I also think that Alex Rins might still be out. We'll probably get an announcement in the coming couple of days. I know he's going to try for being fit, however, if I was him, I'd just have another extra week, because then you get basically 2 weeks, and also, you know, you don't want to ride that Honda when you're not in top form. Again, I'm just creating another word today. I'm impressed with myself. Crikey, what did my dog just break? Turns out it was a shoe. He's now secure in my lap, so we'll see how this goes. On to the sprint predictions. I'm going to go with P3 Luca Marini. I think this track suits him. I think that it'll be a strong performance from Luca, and I think with all that uncertainty about his seat for next year, I think that, yeah, it could be a position for him. P3. I think P2, we're going to see Maverick Vinales. I think coming off the back of last week, I think this is going to be some momentum building for him, and I think that's going to be quite positive. In P1, I'm going to put Brad Binder. I think he's most likely, having that rocket ship KTM start. I think that's going to benefit him. I also think that Pecco is going to be a bit ruled out because he is going to be riding injured if he's riding, and I think, yeah, everyone else who performed strongly last year, like Fabio Quartararo, he's on that absolutely horror show of a Yamaha. I don't think he's going to be in the running. Those are just the only three I can sort of see doing it at the moment. I'd put Alex Rins in there, but if he's riding, he's going to be riding carefully because he's injured and he's on a Honda. So, yeah, that's all I can think of. P3 Luca Marini, P2 Maverick Vinales, and P1 Brad Binder for the sprint. And that brings us on to the main race. I'm going to go a little bit bolder with my predictions on the main race. I think in P3 we're going to have Alex Marquez. So I know he got P10 here last year, but he was on that Honda. So I think being on the Ducati this year, not getting wiped out early in the race, hopefully, like this week, he'll be able to put in a strong performance. So a P3 on the Sunday. I think in P2 we'll see Aleix Espargaro, and maybe I'm actually just manifesting my wholesome podium, the podium I really want, because in P1 I'm putting Maverick Vinales, so that would be Alex Marquez in P3, which would give me nice warm Marquez brother vibes. Aleix Espargaro in P2 and Maverick Vinales in P1 would give me nice wholesome Aprilia vibes, and it would also give us Maverick Vinales being the first person to win with 3 different manufacturers, which would be absolutely wonderful to see. So hopefully that happens. So those are my predictions. Let's pretend they're not horrifically wrong when we meet again next week. As always, thank you very much for listening. Like and subscribe if you feel like it. And we'll speak again.